welcome back to the channel. So I want to talk about Baroness Falkner of Margravine. It is a delight to feature a woman who is a member of an ethnic minority, because we don't have many women of ethnic minority backgrounds in the House of Lords. Baroness Falkner is, of course, the chair of the EHRC, and I will come to that in a moment. But first of all, we're going to look at her contribution to the debate in the House of Lords on the 10th of January, when Lord Blencathra moved his amendment 97ZA.
My Lords, I refer to my interests in the register and want to make it clear that I'm not expressing any opinion on the merits of this particular amendment. But I hope the noble Lord, in winding up, because the debate has ranged far and wide beyond actually the amendment, and because there appears to be some misunderstanding in the House as to what the amendment is, so I hope when he stands to speak to this amendment that he will clarify two important factors. I wonder whether he would tell the House whether housing a trans woman holding a gender recognition certificate on the male estate would be unlawful, as that woman is legally a woman. That's quite an important distinction, and it hasn't come out. There's clearly a misunderstanding there. The second point I'd like him to clarify would be that housing a trans woman on a male estate or a trans man on a woman's estate could be unlawful, as it could amount to discrimination.
So Baroness Falkner, as you heard there, she made a very brief intervention and she asked a technical question about definitions. She recognises the importance of tightening up these definitions, and how if we let definitions drift, we end up in a situation where we have bad laws, and we have to do a lot of work trying to unpick bad laws. So she was asking a question about definitions there. Going back through her previous interventions in the House of Lords, you can see that she really has handle on this topic. So she makes more spoken contributions than written contributions, you know, which she has in common with many other members of the House. She has intervened in several different relevant ways for us to discuss as feminists. She made interventions around the free speech debate, as you would expect, because quite rightly she recognises that the situation we have in higher education is particularly terrifying for those of us who value living in a liberal democracy, because we are not seeing young adults turned out of these institutions with a tolerance of opposing viewpoints. We are seeing people believe that there is only one way of looking at the world that is acceptable. And that is not how democracy works. That is fine under a totalitarian dictatorship. But in a democracy, we have to be able to tolerate the fact that everybody here has a right to think their own thoughts and say their own words, and they don't have to agree. So she intervened to talk about how important it is to have respect for each other's viewpoints, and how respect and tolerance are intrinsic to democracy, but they do not come at the cost of freedom of speech. She also defended Professor Kathleen Stock. Join my tribe or lose your job, which I think is one of the best summaries of the situation that Kathleen Stock had to put up with. And she talks about how by learning the value of tolerance at university, this equips young adults to go out into the world, which of course it does. It's very, very important. So going back to this issue of keep prisons single sex, before the debate on the 10th of January, there was another debate. I think it was the 15th of December. And during that debate, questions kind of went back and forth because it's as a result of that debate that Lord Blencathra changed the amendment that he moved on the 10th of January. So back then, she was very involved in helping to knock that amendment into even better shape by talking about how there is a legal right to gender reassignment, and that has to be balanced against the right of female prisoners. And she recognised how the state has an extraordinary duty of care to people who are incarcerated who can't run away. So that's really, really important. So she talks about how there are differences between prisoners with gender recognition certificate and prisoners without gender recognition certificate in terms of the legal sex. And she talks about how important it is that we don't just throw all the people that are male in the male prison together, because there are some that are uniquely vulnerable. She talks about how violent and sexual offenders are scary, and she says that we do need to look at that, and we do need to work out how we can help female prisoners feel safe if we're going to say to them, well, on a case-by-case basis, we are letting rapists into your prisons. But don't worry, because we think about it carefully before we do it. I think the problem is that we're looking back in time now when we're looking at this particular intervention, and we're looking back to the amendment before it had the additional provision mentioned in terms of a unit specifically for trans prisoners. So I think it's a bit unfair for us to judge it based on like today. You know, it's several months ago, and there's so much work going on behind the scenes. I mean, we only see the very, very tip of the iceberg. So, you know, although her intervention in the debate on the 10th of January was very, very small, there's a lot going on beneath the surface. There's a lot going on about all of this. So, you know, she's also obviously a great advocate for many other people who need the EHCR to protect our rights, migrants. And it is delightful to see that she stands up for disabled people and our right to political participation as well. So thank you very much for that, Baroness Faulkner of Margravine. So I was going to talk about Baroness Faulkner's EHRC statements that they've made over the past week or so, and the huge reaction to those perfectly reasonable and ordinary statements that were made. I can't do that in this video because there's a lot to talk about. There's a lot. So I'm just going to do a very short thing about the EHRC, and there will be more content coming through about that. The EHRC was set up by the Equality Act in 2010, and the aim was that this organisation would be a national human rights organisation, and it would look out for anybody with any of the 9 protected characteristics, which include sex, which include gender reassignment, and which include things like maternity, age, race, disability, sex, gender reassignment. There's 2 more. Can't remember what the other ones are. They're all in the Equality Act. Anyway, so the EHRC was set up to monitor compliance with the Equality Act, and to make sure that what we were doing as a country was actually ensuring that the people with these various protected characteristics were not being discriminated against by society. So, you know, since 2010, 11 years on, where are we now? Well, disabled people still don't have full access to the train network. We still can't get in lots of shops. So I have a lot of beef still about that. But by and large, you know, we're better than we were. One of the things that's changed is that we have become more aware of the rights conflict that is going on in between the rights that were granted for what we were told was a very tiny group of people who wanted to get a gender recognition certificate. We were told that there would be 5,000 of these issued, and there have been 5,000 of these issued. But we're now told that there's an additional 500,000 or millions, possibly, of people who also want to acquire the protected characteristic of gender or gender identity, which isn't a protected characteristic, isn't in the Equality Act. So that isn't in conflict with sex-based rights. Sex-based rights override gender. They override gender identity every time. The conflict is between the actual legitimate protected characteristics, and where there's a conflict between sex and gender reassignment, then it's right that there's a process of negotiation, a process of deciding how we're going to balance those rights so that everybody gets a fair old crack. So since Baroness Falkner took over at the EHRC, there has been a distinct change in tone. She is definitely, as chairwoman, she is definitely ensuring that there is a greater attention paid to the impact of sex, which is, you know, one of the most major, if not the major, source of oppression in society. So it's great to see that she has actually taken that bull by the horns, and you know, they have issued various statements which lead me to believe that they do actually understand now that this rights conflict has to be sorted out in a sensible, grown-up manner through civil discussion and debate, as we sort everything else out in liberal democracies around the world. And long may it continue, because the alternatives are not very nice for anybody. So thanks for joining me for a quick video about Baroness Falkner of Margravine. Very grateful to her for obviously having a good understanding of what's going on with this rights conflict that we're living through. I'll be very interested to find out what she says in the House of Lords regarding Amendment 297F and G about the hospital wards that Baroness Nicholson and Lord Blencathra are moving tonight. I will be updating with some more content related to the EHRC, because there's been such a lot written and said about the EHRC over the last... EHRC, yeah, that's right. Over the last week or so, there's been a lot said. And I have made a few videos about it, so there will be lots of content coming your way. So, thanks for joining me for the video today. It would be great if you would leave me a like or a dislike if you didn't like it. Leave me a comment down below. Subscribe to the channel if you're not already subscribed. Really appreciate your support. If you want to make a practical support, then you can make a donation to my PayPal. Very gratefully receive any donations there with thanks. And I'll see you again soon.